the most dangerous weapons of World War II. World War II wasn't just the deadliest conflict in human history. It was also the greatest arms race the world had ever seen. In just 6 years, nations poured unimaginable resources into building machines of destruction more powerful, more terrifying, and more advanced than anything that had come before. From tanks that could crush entire defensive lines, to bombers that could level cities overnight, to a weapon so powerful it could end the war with a single flash of light. This is the story of the most dangerous weapons of World War II. 1. The atomic bomb. Let's start with the weapon that ended the war and changed the world forever. In August 1945, the United States dropped atomic bombs on the Japanese cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. These weapons, developed in secret through the top-secret Manhattan Project, released energy through nuclear fission, splitting atoms apart to unleash an explosion thousands of times more powerful than any conventional bomb in history. The bomb dropped on Hiroshima, nicknamed Little Boy, detonated with a force equivalent to roughly 15,000 tons of TNT. In an instant, it destroyed nearly 5 square miles of the city. Tens of thousands of people were killed immediately, and tens of thousands more died in the following months from burns, injuries, and radiation sickness. 3 days later, a second bomb, Fat Man, was dropped on Nagasaki, killing tens of thousands more. The atomic bomb wasn't just a weapon. It was the beginning of a new age. For the first time, humanity possessed the power to destroy entire cities in a single strike. It forced Japan's surrender and ended World War II, but it also opened the door to the nuclear arms race that would define the Cold War for decades to come. 2. The V-2 rocket. Before there were satellites or space travel, there was the V-2, the world's first long-range guided ballistic missile, developed by Nazi Germany. Designed under the direction of engineer Wernher von Braun, the V-2 stood over 45 feet tall and could travel faster than the speed of sound, making it impossible to intercept with the technology of the time. It carried roughly 2,000 pounds of explosives and could strike targets hundreds of miles away, including London, which was bombarded by thousands of V-2 rockets starting in September 1944. There was no warning siren, no time to take shelter. Victims heard the explosion before they ever heard the rocket coming, because the V-2 traveled faster than sound itself. The V-2 was built using forced labor from concentration camp prisoners, working in horrific underground factories, and thousands of those laborers died constructing the very weapon meant to terrorize Allied civilians. After the war, the technology behind the V-2 became the foundation for both American and Soviet rocket programs, eventually leading to the space race and the modern missiles that exist today. 3. The Panzer Tank Divisions. When Germany invaded Poland and France, one weapon spearheaded its terrifyingly effective Blitzkrieg tactics: the Panzer Tank. German Panzer Divisions weren't just about individual tank strength. They were about speed, coordination, and combined arms warfare. Tanks worked together with motorized infantry, artillery, and dive-bombing aircraft to smash through enemy lines and encircle opposing forces before they could organize a defense. As the war progressed, German tank design evolved into some of the most feared vehicles on the battlefield, including the Tiger tank, armed with a powerful 88mm gun and thick armor that could withstand hits from most Allied tank guns, and the even heavier King Tiger later in the war. But tanks weren't just a German weapon. The Soviet became legendary for its combination of speed, firepower, and simplicity, easy to mass-produce even under the brutal conditions of wartime Soviet industry, allowing the USSR to replace losses far faster than Germany could match. Many historians consider the T-34 one of the most influential tank designs in military history. 4. Strategic bombs. World War II introduced a terrifying new kind of warfare, one where entire cities, not just soldiers, became targets. Long-range strategic bombers like the American B-17 Flying Fortress and B-29 Superfortress, and the British Avro Lancaster, were capable of flying deep into enemy territory to destroy industrial centers, transportation networks, and, increasingly, as the war went on, civilian population centers themselves. The bombing campaigns grew devastating in scale. The firebombing of Dresden in February 1945 created a firestorm so intense it generated hurricane-force winds that sucked the oxygen out of underground shelters. In March 1945, a single firebombing raid on Tokyo using incendiary bombs killed well over 100,000 people in a single night, one of the deadliest air raids of the entire war. These bombers didn't just destroy military targets. They were designed, in many cases, to break the will of entire nations to keep fighting, a strategy that remains one of the most morally debated aspects of the war to this day. 5. The U-boat. Beneath the waves of the Atlantic Ocean, a different kind of war was being fought, one hidden from view, but just as deadly. Germany's U-boats, submarines capable of stalking convoys of merchant ships for days at a time, nearly succeeded in cutting off Britain's supply lines entirely. Operating in coordinated wolf pack tactics, groups of U-boats would surround convoys at night, launching torpedo attacks that could sink multiple ships before escorts even realized what was happening. At the height of the Battle of the Atlantic, Allied shipping losses were so severe that Britain risked being starved of the food, fuel, and war supplies it needed to keep fighting. It took years of technological innovation, improved sonar, radar, long-range aircraft, and the code-breaking of German naval communications, before the Allies finally turned the tide against the U-boat threat by 1943. 6. Poison gas and chemical weapons. After the horrors of chemical warfare in World War I, most nations avoided using poison gas directly on the battlefield during World War II, fearing retaliation in kind. But that doesn't mean chemical weapons weren't part of this war's story. Nazi Germany developed deadly nerve agents far more advanced and dangerous than anything used in the previous war. Fortunately for millions of soldiers and civilians, Hitler never authorized their use on the battlefield, in part due to inaccurate assumptions about Allied chemical capabilities. But chemical agents were used elsewhere, most horrifically, as the killing method inside Nazi gas chambers during the Holocaust, murdering millions of people in the most industrialized act of genocide the world had ever seen. 7. The flamethrower. Few weapons of World War II were as feared or as horrifying as the flamethrower. Used extensively by both Axis and Allied forces, particularly in close-quarters combat and against fortified bunkers, flamethrowers could project a stream of burning fuel dozens of yards, clearing out entrenched enemy positions that grenades and rifles couldn't reach. In the brutal island fighting of the Pacific War, American forces relied heavily on flamethrowers, both handheld and mounted on tanks, to clear Japanese defenders from caves and bunkers on islands like Iwo Jima and Okinawa. It was a devastatingly effective weapon tactically. It was also one of the most terrifying to face, and to use, flamethrower operators were considered high-priority targets by enemy snipers, given the devastation they could inflict. 8. The MG-42 machine gun. On the infantry level, one weapon earned a reputation so fearsome that Allied soldiers gave it a nickname of its own: Hitler's buzzsaw. The German MG-42 machine gun could fire up to 1,200 rounds per minute, nearly twice the rate of most Allied machine guns, producing a distinctive tearing sound unlike any other weapon on the battlefield. Its incredible rate of fire made it devastating in defensive positions, capable of cutting down advancing infantry in seconds. The MG-42's design was so effective that its basic mechanism influenced machine gun designs, used by militaries around the world for decades after the war ended. 9. The proximity fuse. Not every dangerous weapon of World War II was a massive bomb or a roaring tank. Some of the deadliest innovations were much smaller, but changed the course of entire battles. The proximity fuse, developed in top secrecy by the United States, was a tiny radar device fitted inside artillery shells that allowed them to detonate automatically when they came close to a target, rather than requiring a direct hit or a timed fuse. This dramatically increased the effectiveness of anti-aircraft fire and artillery barrages. Proximity-fused shells played a critical role defending against Japanese kamikaze attacks in the Pacific and against German V-1 flying bombs over Britain, and later proved devastating against infantry during the Battle of the Bulge, where they allowed artillery to detonate deadly airburst explosions directly above enemy troops. World War II was a war fought not just with courage and strategy, but with terrifying technological innovation. Nearly every weapon developed during this conflict, from jet aircraft to guided missiles to nuclear weapons, reshaped not only how the war was fought, but how every conflict since has been fought as well. These weapons won battles. They ended the war, but they also left behind a legacy the world still lives with today, a reminder of just how far human ingenuity can go, for better and for devastatingly worse. If you found this video interesting, make sure to subscribe for more deep dives into the history of World War II.